shadows in the glow of resilience. The warm hum of a midsummer evening wrapped around Street Mercy's hospital like a comforting blanket. The sprawling medical campus bustled during the day, but transformed into an oasis of quiet at night, save for the occasional hum of emergency vehicles. The parking lot glistened under the golden light of aging lampposts, casting long shadows across rows of neatly parked cars. Maya Daniels, a registered nurse in her early 30s, stepped out of the hospital's main entrance, her posture slightly slouched from the weight of another 12-hour shift. Her scrubs, now creased from hours of constant movement, bore faint remnants of the day's work, an ink smudge near her chest pocket, a water stain on the hem of her pants, and a faint but persistent smell of antiseptic. Despite the exhaustion etched across her face, her brown eyes retained a spark, a quiet strength born from years of determination. As she crossed the lot, Maya dug through her tote bag, her fingers brushing against her phone, keys, and an old granola bar wrapper. Her mind replayed snippets of her day. A little boy with a broken arm whose smile she coaxed through the pain. A frail elderly woman whose hand she held as she whispered reassurances, and a harried intern she had gently coached during a tense moment in the ER. It wasn't just work for Maya. It was a calling, a way to honor her late mother, Evelyn, a woman whose compassion had touched many lives in their tight-knit community. Evelyn had been a housekeeper who raised Maya and her two siblings with little more than grit and a heart brimming with love. The lessons Evelyn imparted about kindness, integrity, and the courage to stand firm echoed in Maya's actions daily. Maya often smiled at the memory of her mother's voice, her words clear as a bell. If you stand for nothing, they'll make you fall for anything. Always know your worth, baby girl. Tonight, though, an unshakable unease gripped Maya. It wasn't the usual tiredness that came after a long shift. It was something else, a prickling at the base of her neck, an instinct honed over years of navigating subtle biases and overt challenges. She had grown accustomed to dismissive comments and sidelong glances, brushing off questions like, "Are you the aide?" or assumptions that her decisions needed validation by someone higher up. Those moments hurt, but she never let them define her. Instead, she chose to focus on the people she served and the colleagues who respected her deeply. Her car came into view, a modest blue sedan parked in the far corner of the employee lot. As she approached, the sound of gravel crunching under slow-moving tires drew her attention. A police cruiser idled nearby, its headlights casting an eerie glow on the asphalt. Behind the wheel sat a man with a hard expression, his silhouette outlined against the flicker of the dash lights. Maya's chest tightened as she read the officer's name badge. Thompson. She wasn't sure why he was there, but his gaze felt invasive, scrutinizing her as though she were a trespasser on her own turf. Maya quickened her pace, gripping her tote bag tighter. She told herself to stay calm, to focus on her car, her safe haven. But as her fingers brushed the door handle, the officer's voice cut through the stillness. "Hey, you, stop right there." The sharpness of his tone froze her in place. Maya turned slowly, her heart racing. Her voice was steady, though her mind churned with questions. "Yes, officer. Is there a problem?" Thompson stepped out of the car, adjusting his belt in a calculated display of authority. His boots echoed across the pavement as he approached, his posture exuding intimidation. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his tone accusatory. Maya blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I work here. I'm just leaving after my shift." She gestured toward the hospital, her badge still clipped to the neckline of her scrubs. "This is the employee lot." He didn't look at her badge. His eyes flicked over her, a mixture of skepticism and disdain. "Parking wherever you feel like, huh? Thinking rules don't apply to you." Her stomach twisted. This isn't about parking, she realized. She inhaled deeply, grounding herself. "Officer, I've parked here for years. It's where employees park. If there's an issue, I'd be happy to address it. But I've done nothing wrong." Thompson scoffed, crossing his arms. "I don't like your attitude," he shot back. His words dripped with contempt, each syllable landing like a slap. You people think you can talk to me any way you want. Maya's pulse quickened, her anger barely contained. You people. The words were a familiar weapon, wielded with casual cruelty. Still, she stood firm. With all due respect, officer, I'm being polite. I just want to get home. The tension between them thickened. Thompson stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. His voice dropped to a low growl. Watch your tone. Things could go a lot worse for you. The words hit her like a physical blow. Maya's breath hitched, fear clawing at the edges of her composure. She had spent her life helping others, building bridges in a fractured world. And yet here she was, reduced, in his eyes, to something small, something to be controlled. Please, she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain steady. There's no need for this. But Thompson didn't relent. He shoved her back against the car, his hand pressing into her shoulder. Pain shot through her, and she gasped in shock. Around them, the faint murmurs of hospital staff turned to gasps and whispers. Hey, that's not right. Someone shouted. Maya glanced around, her vision blurred by the sting of humiliation and the flash of phones recording the scene. Strangers, colleagues, and passersby stood frozen, their faces etched with disbelief. The officer leaned closer, his voice a venomous whisper. You better learn your place, or I'll teach you. Maya's tears welled but didn't fall. Instead, a surge of defiance rose within her, a spark fueled by her mother's voice, her own dignity, and the countless moments she had swallowed her pride to keep peace. This time, she wouldn't shrink. Before she could speak, a commanding voice broke through the tension. Maya. The crowd parted, and there he was, Marcus Daniels, her older brother. Broad-shouldered, with an air of quiet authority, Marcus was known throughout the community as a fierce advocate for justice. His presence was a balm, and a rallying cry all at once. Marcus approached swiftly, his eyes locking onto Thompson's with a fire that made the officer step back. What do you think you're doing to my sister? His voice was calm, but carried a weight that silenced even the murmuring crowd. For the first time, Maya felt the tide shift. The weight of injustice and unity in a unique and engaging style. The parking lot was a battlefield of tension, silence hanging heavy between Officer Thompson and the crowd now surrounding him. Marcus Daniels had entered like a storm breaking over calm waters, his commanding presence drawing every eye. His 6'2" frame was a wall of resilience, his sharp suit and polished shoes a stark contrast to the aggression simmering in Thompson's stance. Maya leaned against her car, clutching her shoulder where Thompson had shoved her. She was bruised but unbroken, her anger tempered by the sight of her older brother stepping into the fray. Marcus's voice rang out again, sharp as a blade. I ask you a question, Officer Thompson. What do you think you're doing assaulting my sister? Thompson squared his shoulders, his defensive arrogance flickering in the face of Marcus's calm authority. This isn't your business, sir, he said gruffly, trying to regain control. Your sister was acting suspiciously, and I was doing my job. Suspiciously, Marcus repeated, his voice steady but brimming with disbelief. He gestured to Maya, still in her hospital scrubs. She's a nurse finishing a 12-hour shift at this very hospital. She has a badge, a parking permit, and a spotless record. What exactly was suspicious about that? Thompson hesitated, his eyes darting to the crowd that had now grown larger. Phones were still recording, their tiny cameras capturing every word. Voices murmured from the group, their tone shifting from passive observation to vocal indignation. This is ridiculous, someone muttered. She's one of us, another said. We see her here every day. Thompson's resolve faltered, his authority crumbling under the weight of the growing dissent. But instead of backing down, he doubled down, his tone defensive and harsh. I don't have to explain myself to you or anyone else. I was ensuring public safety, and she gave me attitude. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained calm. Public safety doesn't require you to shove an unarmed woman, officer. It doesn't give you the right to abuse your authority." He took a step forward, his presence towering over Thompson's diminishing bravado. "And let me make one thing clear. You will explain yourself, not just to me, but to everyone watching." Thompson glanced at the crowd again, his confidence now visibly shaken. He reached for his radio, muttering something under his breath, but it was clear the situation was slipping out of his control. The crowd wasn't dispersing. Instead, it was solidifying, a wall of community support standing firm behind Maya and Marcus. Jasmine, one of Maya's closest friends and a fellow nurse, stepped forward from the crowd. Her voice rang out, clear and unyielding. "We've worked with Maya for years. She's one of the best nurses in this hospital, and she's always been professional, compassionate, and dedicated. You don't get to treat her like a criminal just because you can." More voices joined in, their frustration boiling over. "We see this too often," an older man said. "They think they can intimidate us, and we're supposed to stay quiet." "Not anymore." Maya, still leaning against her car, felt a surge of gratitude and awe at the solidarity unfolding before her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about something much larger. A collective frustration with systemic injustices that had gone unchallenged for too long. Marcus turned back to Maya, his expression softening as he placed a protective hand on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm fine, just shaken." Marcus nodded, then turned back to Thompson, his tone shifting to one of measured control. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to step back, and you're going to think very carefully about your next move. Because this," he gestured to the crowd, "isn't going away. These people are watching. They're recording, and they're not going to let you sweep this under the rug." Thompson opened his mouth to retort, but before he could speak, a new voice cut through the air. "He's right, officer. This isn't going away." The crowd turned as an older black man stepped forward, his hospital security badge glinting in the lamplight. His name was Roger Whitman, a retired police officer turned security supervisor who had worked at the hospital for over 2 decades. His reputation as a fair and level-headed professional preceded him, and his presence added weight to the growing resistance. Roger fixed Thompson with a steely gaze. "I've been watching this whole thing," he said, his tone even but firm. "And I can tell you right now, you're out of line. This young woman has done nothing wrong. If you don't step back, you're going to find yourself in a world of trouble." Thompson hesitated, his bravado crumbling under the combined force of Marcus, Roger, and the crowd. He glanced around, realizing he was outnumbered and outmatched. With a gruff mutter, he took a step back, his posture still tense but retreating. "Fine," he said, his voice lacking the authority it once held. "I'll call this in." As Thompson retreated to his cruiser, the crowd erupted into cheers and applause. The tension in the air shifted, replaced by a palpable sense of triumph and unity. Maya felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear or pain, but from the overwhelming support surrounding her. Marcus turned to the crowd, his voice carrying over the applause. "This isn't just about what happened tonight. It's about a pattern we've seen over and over. Good people being mistreated, dismissed, or disrespected simply because of who they are. Tonight, we stood up, and that matters. But this is just the beginning." The crowd murmured in agreement, their voices filled with determination. Roger stepped forward again, addressing the group. "We can't let this moment fade. If we want real change, we need to stay organized, stay united, and make sure our voices are heard every single time." Maya looked around at the faces in the crowd, her friends, colleagues, neighbors, and strangers who had come together in a moment of crisis. She felt a surge of determination rise within her, a spark of courage she hadn't known she possessed. "I'm ready," she said softly, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "I'm ready to fight for what's right. Not just for me, but for everyone who's ever felt powerless." Marcus smiled, pride shining in his eyes. You're stronger than you know, Maya, and you're not alone. We're with you." The crowd erupted in cheers once more, their unity solidifying into something unbreakable. Maya stood tall, the weight of her fear and exhaustion giving way to a newfound sense of purpose. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was a symbol of resilience, a voice for change, and the heart of a community ready to fight for justice. As the group began to disperse, exchanging contact information and pledging to stay connected, Maya felt a sense of hope bloom within her. The battle wasn't over, but tonight had proven one thing. They were stronger together. And this was only the beginning. Sparks of resistance. The parking lot confrontation was the talk of the community by the following morning. The video recordings, shared across social media, had gone viral within hours. Clips of Maya's poised defiance, Marcus's unyielding stand, and the crowd's support painted a vivid picture of resilience against abuse of power. Local news stations picked up the story, airing segments under headlines like "Nurse Stands Against Injustice" and "Community Rallies Behind Hospital Worker." For Maya, the days that followed were a blur of emotions. She sat at her small kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. Messages from friends, colleagues, and strangers poured in. Some offering support, others sharing their own experiences with systemic injustice. A particular comment from a young woman struck her heart. "I never thought I'd have the courage to speak up, but seeing you did something to me. Thank you." Maya exhaled, placing the phone down. The weight of what had happened was starting to feel bigger than her. Marcus arrived that afternoon, his face alight with purpose. He carried a worn leather notebook, a relic from his days as a community organizer. He placed it on the table and sat across from Maya, his presence a calming anchor in her storm of thoughts. "Maya," he began, his voice steady, "I know you're still processing what happened, but you need to know something. This isn't just about you anymore. The community is waking up. People are angry, inspired, and ready to act. You've become a symbol, whether you wanted to or not." Maya looked at him, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I'm just a nurse, Marcus. I didn't ask for this. I don't know how to lead a movement." Marcus leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "You don't need to have all the answers. Leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about standing for something bigger than yourself. And right now, people are looking to you because you showed courage when it mattered most." His words hung in the air, and Maya felt a mix of fear and determination. She thought of the people in the parking lot, the way their voices had risen together against injustice. It wasn't just her fight. It was theirs too. "We need to channel this energy," Marcus continued, flipping open his notebook. "I've already reached out to a few people, local organizers, activists, and even some of your colleagues who want to help. The first step is a community meeting. We'll gather stories, build solidarity, and plan our next move." Maya hesitated but finally nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The first meeting. The recreation center was a modest building on the edge of the neighborhood, its walls adorned with faded posters advertising fitness classes and summer camps. When Maya and Marcus arrived, they were greeted by Jasmine, who had volunteered to help set up. Folding chairs were arranged in a wide circle, and a simple table at the front held a stack of flyers titled, "Justice for All, Building a Stronger Community." By the time the meeting started, the room was packed. Nurses from the hospital, local shop owners, parents, students, and elders filled every seat, with many standing along the walls. Maya was overwhelmed by the turnout. Faces she recognized mingled with strangers, all drawn by a shared sense of urgency. Marcus opened the meeting with his signature calm authority. "Thank you all for being here," he said, his deep voice commanding the room's attention. "What happened to my sister was wrong. But it's not an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern, one that affects people in this room and beyond. Tonight, we're here to listen, to share, and to start building a path forward." He stepped aside, gesturing for Maya to join him. Her heart pounded as she stood, but the encouraging murmurs from the crowd gave her strength. She took a deep breath and began. "I never thought I'd be standing here," she admitted, her voice steady despite the nerves. "I've always believed in helping people. That's why I became a nurse. But last week, I realized that helping isn't enough if we don't also stand up for each other. What happened to me is just one story, but I know there are many more." She paused, scanning the room. "So tonight, I want to hear your stories. Because this isn't just about me. It's about all of us." The room was silent for a moment before a young man in his early 20s raised his hand. He stood, his voice shaking slightly as he spoke. "My name's Darnell. I work at the grocery store down the street. Last month, I got stopped by a cop while walking home from my shift. He said I looked suspicious. All I had was a bag of groceries. I didn't fight back because I didn't want things to escalate. But..." He trailed off, his eyes darting to the floor. "It's not right. I shouldn't have to feel afraid just because of how I look." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. An older woman spoke next, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm Mary. I've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years. But lately, I feel like I don't belong anymore. People look at me like I'm a stranger in my own home. It's exhausting." Story after story poured out, each one a thread in a tapestry of shared experiences. A teenager described being followed in a store for no reason. A mother spoke of her son being targeted by school staff because of his background. An elder recounted decades of quiet indignities endured in silence. Maya listened, her chest tight with emotion. These were her neighbors, her friends, her community. And their pain mirrored her own. When the last speaker sat down, the room fell silent, the weight of their collective truth settling over them. Marcus broke the silence. "Thank you for sharing your stories. They're powerful, and they matter. Now the question is, what do we do next?" Turning stories into action. The meeting stretched late into the evening. As the group brainstormed ideas, Jasmine suggested starting a social media campaign to amplify their voices. Roger, the hospital security supervisor, proposed workshops on knowing one's rights during police interactions. A teacher volunteered to organize a march to raise awareness about the broader issues of systemic discrimination. By the end of the night, the group had a plan. They would hold a Justice for All rally in 2 weeks, followed by a series of community workshops and support networks. Maya was tasked with sharing her story at the rally, while Marcus would lead the effort to coordinate logistics. As the attendees filtered out, many stopped to thank Maya personally. One woman, holding the hand of her young daughter, said, "What you did gave me hope. My little girl deserves to grow up in a world where she's treated with respect. Thank you." Maya's eyes stung with unshed tears as she hugged the woman. "We'll fight for that world together," she promised. When the last person had left, Marcus turned to her, a proud smile on his face. "You did good, Maya." She nodded, her exhaustion mingling with a deep sense of purpose. This is just the start. The ripple effect. In the days that followed, the energy from the meeting spread like wildfire. Flyers for the rally appeared on every corner, and the hashtag Justice for All began trending locally. Maya's story gained traction, drawing attention from advocacy groups and even national news outlets. Calls came in from journalists wanting interviews, from strangers offering support, and from organizations hoping to collaborate. But with the momentum came challenges. Skeptics dismissed their efforts as futile. Anonymous messages filled with vitriol appeared in Maya's inbox, warning her to stay in her place. The weight of it all threatened to overwhelm her at times, but each time she faltered, she thought of the voices in that recreation center, the stories that needed to be told. One night, as she and Marcus worked late into the evening, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Remember, Maya," he said softly, "this isn't just your fight. It's ours. And we're not backing down." She smiled, a flicker of determination reigniting in her chest. Together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The weight of leadership. The days leading up to the Justice for All rally were a whirlwind of planning, emotion, and unrelenting determination. Maya had never seen herself as a leader, but the community's faith in her and Marcus's steadfast encouragement propelled her forward. Her living room transformed into a makeshift command center. The table was buried under stacks of flyers, notebooks filled with ideas, and schedules carefully planned by Jasmine and a small team of volunteers. The faint scent of coffee hung in the air, a testament to countless late nights. Maya's laptop chimed incessantly with emails and messages, each one bringing a mixture of hope and pressure. Maya took a moment to pause, standing by her kitchen window as she cradled a mug of coffee. Outside, the streetlights bathed the neighborhood in a warm glow. It felt surreal that just weeks ago, she had been a nurse quietly going about her life. Now, her name and face were everywhere, a beacon for some, a target for others. Marcus entered the room, carrying another box of supplies. His tie was loosened, and his sleeves were rolled up, but his energy never seemed to wane. "How are you holding up?" he asked, setting the box down. Maya sighed, her gaze distant. "I'm not sure, Marcus. I keep thinking, what if we fail? What if this rally is just a moment, and nothing changes?" He stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Change isn't about moments, Maya. It's about momentum. This rally is a step, not the destination. You've already done something incredible by standing up. Now, we keep going." She nodded, his words sinking in. "I just don't want to let anyone down." "You won't," he assured her. "You've already lifted them up." Community connection. In the final days before the rally, the movement began to take on a life of its own. Meetings were held in libraries, coffee shops, and community centers. Local businesses offered donations, bottled water, snacks, even banners for the event. Churches and youth groups joined the cause, spreading the word through their networks. One evening, Maya attended a meeting at a local church. The room was filled with people of all ages and backgrounds. An elderly man stood up, his cane tapping the floor as he spoke. "I've lived here for 50 years, he said, his voice strong despite his age. "I've seen a lot of wrongs go unanswered. But seeing all of you here tonight, seeing this young lady standing up, it gives me hope. We can't let this chance slip away." His words were met with applause, and Maya felt a lump rise in her throat. Every meeting, every story, every moment of solidarity added fuel to her resolve. This wasn't just her fight. It belonged to everyone in the room, and they were ready to stand together. The night before the rally, the exhaustion finally caught up with Maya. She sat on her couch, staring at the speech she had been working on for days. The words blurred together, her mind racing with doubts. What if she stumbled? What if she said the wrong thing? What if no one showed up? Jasmine appeared in the doorway, holding 2 steaming cups of tea. "You've been staring at that for hours," she said, sitting beside Maya. "Take a break." Maya rubbed her temples. "I don't know if I can do this. Jasmine, what if I freeze up? What if—" "Stop," Jasmine interrupted gently. "You don't have to be perfect, Maya. People aren't coming to hear a polished speech. They're coming to hear you. Speak from your heart, and you'll be fine." Maya took a deep breath, nodding. "You're right. I want this to matter." "It already does," Jasmine said with a reassuring smile. "Now get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a big day." The morning of the rally. The morning dawned crisp and clear, the early light spilling across the city like a promise. When Maya arrived at the park, she was overwhelmed by the sight. Volunteers bustled about, setting up chairs, arranging tables, and adjusting the sound system. Banners emblazoned with the words "Justice for All" stretched across the stage, fluttering gently in the breeze. By mid-morning, people began to arrive. At first, they trickled in, small groups of families, friends, and neighbors. But soon, the park was filled with a sea of faces, their energy palpable. Young children ran around with signs they had helped make, while elders sat in folding chairs, their expressions resolute. Teens wore shirts bearing slogans like "Silence is complicity" and "Enough is enough." Maya stood backstage, watching the scene unfold. Her nerves threatened to overwhelm her, but Marcus placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Look at them," he said, gesturing to the crowd. "They're here because of you. You gave them something to believe in." She swallowed hard, nodding. "I just hope I don't let them down." "You won't," he said firmly. "Now go out there and speak your truth." A voice for change. When Maya stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into cheers. She paused, taking in the sight of the hundreds, maybe thousands, of people who had gathered. Her heart raced, but she held her head high, gripping the microphone with both hands. "Thank you for being here," she began, her voice carrying across the park. "Today isn't about me. It's about us, about every single one of you who has ever felt unseen, unheard, or disrespected. It's about a community coming together to say, enough is enough." The crowd cheered, their energy fueling her confidence. "I never thought I'd be standing here," she continued. "I'm not a politician or an activist. I'm a nurse. But last week, I learned that sometimes standing up is the most important thing you can do. What happened to me wasn't unique. It was part of a pattern, one that we've all experienced in some way. And it's time to break that pattern." She shared stories from the community: the young man who had been profiled, the mother who feared for her children, the elder who had endured decades of quiet indignities. Each story was a testament to the resilience and strength of those who had come together to fight for change. "We deserve better," Maya said, her voice rising with passion. "We deserve respect, dignity, and justice. And we won't stop until we get it." The crowd erupted into chants of "Justice, justice, justice." The sound reverberated through the park, a powerful declaration of unity and resolve. A movement ignited. As other speakers took the stage, Maya stepped aside, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Jasmine hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes. "You were amazing," she said. Marcus joined them, his pride evident. "This is just the beginning," he said. "The hard work starts now." Maya nodded, her heart full. The rally was a success, but she knew the journey ahead would be long and challenging. Yet, for the first time, she felt ready. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was part of something bigger, something unstoppable. The spark had been lit, and the fire of resistance was burning bright. The rally for justice. The air in the park buzzed with energy. The Justice for All rally had drawn a crowd larger than anyone expected, stretching beyond the planned seating area and spilling into the surrounding green spaces. Maya stood backstage, stealing glances at the sea of faces as each speaker took their turn. The sound of applause, cheers, and occasional chants filled the air, carrying the weight of a community ready to demand change. Despite the excitement, Maya's nerves simmered beneath her steady exterior. This was her first time speaking to such a large crowd. She adjusted the microphone pinned to her blouse, her hands trembling slightly. Marcus, always the calming presence, stood beside her. "You've got this," he said softly, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Just remember why we're here." Maya nodded, inhaling deeply. She glanced at Jasmine, who gave her an encouraging thumbs up from the crowd. The sight of her closest friend reminded her that she wasn't alone. The MC called her name, and the applause was deafening as Maya stepped onto the stage. She paused at the podium, the sight of the crowd stealing her breath for a moment. Hundreds, no, thousands, of faces stared back, their expressions filled with hope, determination, and solidarity. Children perched on their parents' shoulders, elders sat in folding chairs, and young activists waved signs that read, "Justice for all. Silence is complicity." And Maya stood up. "So can we." She gripped the edges of the podium, grounding herself as the crowd quieted. The microphone picked up her first breath as she began. Maya's speech. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "Thank you all for being here. Today isn't just about me. It's about every single one of us who has ever faced injustice and stayed silent because we were afraid. It's about turning fear into courage and using our voices to demand what we all deserve: respect, dignity, and equality. A ripple of applause spread through the crowd, and Maya felt her confidence grow. 2 weeks ago, I was just a nurse leaving my shift. I was tired, ready to go home, and looking forward to the simple comfort of rest. But instead, I was stopped, questioned, and assaulted, not because I did anything wrong, but because someone in a position of power thought they could. That moment was humiliating. It was frightening. But most of all, it was a reminder that no matter how hard we work, no matter how much we give, some people will still see us as less. Her voice cracked slightly, but she pressed on. That officer's actions weren't unique. They were part of a larger pattern, one that so many of us in this crowd have experienced in different ways. We've been followed in stores, profiled in our neighborhoods, questioned at our jobs, and silenced when we tried to speak out. But today, we are breaking that silence. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Maya took a moment to let their energy wash over her. She saw faces nodding in agreement, fists raised in solidarity. The strength of their support fueled her. I stand here today not just for myself, but for every mother who worries about her child walking home at night, for every young person who feels the weight of prejudice before they've even had a chance to prove themselves, for every elder who has carried a lifetime of indignities with quiet resilience. We are here to say enough is enough. The crowd roared, chants of enough is enough, echoing across the park. Maya smiled, a new fire burning in her chest. This rally is just the beginning. We are going to turn our pain into power, our frustration into action, and our unity into a force for change. Together, we can build a future where our children don't have to fight the same battles we've endured. But it starts with us, right here, right now. She paused, scanning the crowd as she delivered her final words. So let's make this promise to each other. We will not stop. We will not be silent. And we will not let injustice define us. Because together, we are unstoppable. The crowd exploded into applause, cheers, and chants of justice for all. Maya stepped back from the podium, her heart pounding as tears blurred her vision. Marcus was the first to meet her backstage, pulling her into a tight hug. "You were incredible," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Absolutely incredible." Maya smiled through her tears. For the first time, she truly believed in her ability to lead. Building a movement, the rally continued with other speakers sharing their stories. A young father talked about the fear of raising a black son in a society where stereotypes could cost him his life. A teacher shared her struggles advocating for her immigrant students. An elder, a retired civil rights activist, spoke of the progress made in his lifetime and the work that remained. Each story built upon the last, weaving a powerful tapestry of resilience and hope. The crowd was captivated, their cheers and applause growing louder with every speaker. By the time the rally concluded, the atmosphere was electric, a shared sense of purpose binding everyone together. As the crowd began to disperse, many approached Maya to thank her. A teenager handed her a bracelet woven with the words, "Courage changes everything." A woman introduced herself as a social worker and offered to help organize future events. A local journalist requested an interview, eager to amplify the movement's message. Marcus stepped forward, clipboard in hand. "We've gathered over 300 signatures for the Oversight Committee proposal," he said, his excitement barely contained. "This is the momentum we needed." Maya nodded, her heart swelling with pride and gratitude. "We're just getting started." The challenges ahead. In the days following the rally, the movement continued to grow. Social media posts with the hashtag Justice for All flooded timelines, photos of the rally spreading far and wide. Local businesses displayed posters supporting the cause, and community members began organizing smaller meetings to keep the conversation alive. But with the momentum came resistance. Maya received emails and messages filled with vitriol, accusing her of stirring up trouble. Anonymous letters were slipped under her door, warning her to know her place. Some colleagues at the hospital distanced themselves, their discomfort with her newfound activism evident. One evening, as Maya and Marcus reviewed the Oversight Committee proposal, she expressed her doubts. What if we're pushing too hard? What if this backlash grows, and we lose everything we've built? Marcus looked up from his notes, his expression firm. Maya, change always comes with resistance. The fact that people are fighting back means we're doing something right. It's not easy, but it's worth it. She nodded, his words bolstering her resolve. I just want to make sure this matters. That it lasts. It will, Marcus assured her. Because we're not doing this alone. A ripple of change. By the end of the month, the City Council agreed to hold a public hearing on the proposed Oversight Committee. The news spread quickly, sparking both excitement and anxiety. It was a small victory, but a significant step towards systemic change. Maya stood before the mirror in her bedroom the night before the hearing, rehearsing her speech. Her reflection stared back, her eyes filled with determination. She thought of her mother's voice, the lessons of resilience and strength she had carried all her life. This is for you, Mom, she whispered, and for everyone who deserves better. When she walked into City Hall the next day, she wasn't just a nurse or a victim of injustice. She was a leader, carrying the voices of her community with her. The fight for accountability. The day of the City Council hearing dawned with a quiet intensity. Maya stood outside City Hall, flanked by Marcus and a growing crowd of supporters. They held handmade signs reading "Accountability Now" and "Justice for All," their voices mingling in a low buzz of anticipation. The morning air was crisp, and Maya felt the weight of the moment settle heavily on her shoulders. Are you ready? Marcus asked, his voice steady as he adjusted his tie. Maya nodded, her hands clutching the folder containing the carefully prepared proposal. I'm ready, she replied, though her stomach churned with a mixture of nerves and determination. She glanced at the crowd. Familiar faces from the rally, strangers who had joined the cause, and colleagues from the hospital. Their presence gave her strength. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about the community that had rallied behind her, about holding those in power accountable, and about ensuring that no one else had to face what she had endured. The heavy doors of City Hall creaked open, and the crowd quieted as Maya and Marcus led the way inside. The council chamber. The chamber was a grand, imposing room with high ceilings, polished wood paneling, and a row of council members seated at a long table at the front. Reporters lined the back of the room, their cameras and microphones poised to capture every moment. The public seating area was packed, with supporters spilling into the aisles. Maya took her seat at the front, her proposal resting on the table before her. Beside her, Marcus reviewed his notes, his calm presence grounding her. To their left sat the city attorney, a woman with sharp features and an air of authority. To their right, a police representative shifted uncomfortably, his face unreadable. The council chair, an older man with graying hair and a somber expression, called the meeting to order. His gavel struck the wooden block, silencing the murmurs that had filled the room. We are here today to address the proposal for an independent oversight committee, he began, his voice measured. This committee would be tasked with reviewing incidents of police misconduct and ensuring accountability within our city's law enforcement. We will hear statements from both sides before opening the floor to public comment. Maya felt her pulse quicken as the chair gestured for her to begin. She rose to her feet, her folder clasped tightly in her hands. Maya's statement. Good morning, members of the council, she began, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. My name is Maya Daniels. I am a nurse, a community member, and recently, someone who experienced firsthand the kind of injustice this proposal seeks to address. She paused, scanning the faces of the council members. Some looked attentive, others skeptical. She pressed on. 2 weeks ago, I was assaulted by a police officer in the parking lot of my workplace. I was questioned, shoved, and humiliated, not because I broke any laws, but because someone in a position of power believed they could treat me that way without consequence. That experience was not just about me. It was a reflection of a systemic issue that many in our community face. She opened the folder, her hands trembling slightly as she pulled out the proposal. This document outlines the creation of an independent oversight committee, one that would ensure incidents like mine are investigated fairly and transparently. This is not an attack on law enforcement. It is a call for accountability, for fairness, and for trust to be rebuilt between officers and the people they serve. The chamber was silent as she continued, her voice growing stronger. Our community deserves to feel safe, not just from crime, but from the very people tasked with protecting us. This oversight committee is a step toward that safety. It is a step toward justice. When she finished, Maya exhaled, her heart pounding. She returned to her seat, catching Marcus's approving nod. The room remained quiet for a moment before the council chair called the next speaker. Resistance from the other side. The police representative rose to his feet, his expression neutral but his tone defensive. While I sympathize with Ms. Daniels and the unfortunate incident she experienced, I must stress that our officers already face immense scrutiny in their daily work. Adding another layer of oversight would only hinder their ability to perform their duties effectively. He gestured toward the council. Our department has internal processes to address misconduct. What we need is support, not more bureaucracy. The murmurs from the crowd grew louder, discontent rippling through the room. Maya clenched her fists, frustration bubbling beneath her calm exterior. She had heard these arguments before, excuses cloaked in reasonableness, designed to maintain the status quo. When the police representative finished, Marcus stood to deliver his rebuttal. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable edge of determination. With all due respect, Marcus began, internal processes are not enough. If they were, we wouldn't be here today. Trust in law enforcement is eroding because communities feel unheard and unprotected. This proposal isn't about hindering officers. It's about ensuring they are held to the same standards of accountability as anyone else in a position of power. The crowd murmured in agreement, and Marcus pressed on. Accountability isn't the enemy of effective policing. It's the foundation of it. And if we want a future where officers and communities can work together, we need to start by addressing the injustices that divide us. Voices from the community. The council opened the floor to public comments, and the room came alive with stories. A young woman described being profiled while walking home from school. An elderly man recounted how his grandson had been wrongfully detained. A middle-aged mother shared her fear every time her teenage son left the house. Each story was a thread in the tapestry of shared pain and resilience. Maya listened, her heart heavy but hopeful. These voices were why she had taken this fight to the council, why she refused to back down. One speaker, a teenage girl with braided hair and a confident stance, stepped forward. "I'm here today because I believe in what Ms. Daniels is fighting for," she said, her voice steady. "We're taught in school to stand up for what's right, but how can we when the system itself is wrong? This oversight committee isn't just about accountability. It's about hope. Hope that my generation won't have to grow up in fear." Her words drew a standing ovation, the applause echoing through the chamber. Maya felt tears prick her eyes. This was why she fought, for the next generation, and the one after that. The council's deliberation. After hours of statements, the council recessed to deliberate. The crowd spilled into the hallway, their voices a mix of hope and apprehension. Maya leaned against a wall, exhaustion tugging at her, but Marcus's reassuring presence kept her grounded. "They'll approve it," he said confidently. "They can't ignore what just happened in there." Maya nodded, though a part of her remained anxious. The stakes felt impossibly high. When the council reconvened, the chamber fell silent. The chair cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. After careful consideration, he began, The council has decided to approve the formation of an independent oversight committee. However, we will require further discussions to determine its structure and scope." The room erupted into cheers, the crowd's relief and joy palpable. Maya felt a wave of emotion crash over her. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a significant step forward. The path ahead. As Maya and Marcus left City Hall, they were met with hugs, handshakes, and words of gratitude. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the jubilant crowd. Maya felt both exhausted and invigorated, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and determination. "This is just the beginning," Marcus said, his voice filled with conviction. "We've got a lot of work to do." Maya nodded, a small smile breaking through her fatigue. "We'll do it. Together." As she walked away from City Hall, surrounded by her community, Maya knew the road ahead would be long and challenging. But for the first time, she felt certain they were moving in the right direction. They had taken the first step toward justice, and nothing could stop them now. A legacy of change. The glow of the council's decision lingered in the community like the warmth of a rising sun. For days, the streets buzzed with conversations about the victory. People congratulated Maya at every turn, on her walk to the hospital, at the grocery store, even during her shifts. She appreciated the encouragement, but she knew the work had only just begun. The Oversight Committee was a significant step forward, but it was far from a solution. Now Maya faced the daunting task of ensuring the committee wasn't just symbolic. It needed teeth, real authority to investigate, hold officers accountable, and rebuild trust. And that required navigating the labyrinth of bureaucracy and overcoming resistance from those who preferred the status quo. The growing movement. The momentum from the council meeting sparked an unprecedented level of community engagement. Volunteers flooded Maya and Marcus's modest headquarters, which was little more than a shared space in a community center. Jasmine worked tirelessly to organize schedules and delegate tasks, her knack for detail proving invaluable. Roger, the retired officer turned security supervisor, became an informal advisor, lending his experience and perspective to the planning. Meetings grew larger, spilling into church basements, school gyms, and even local coffee shops. People who had never attended a protest or spoken up about injustice found themselves drawn to the cause. Teenagers designed flyers and ran social media campaigns. Elders shared their wisdom and stories, grounding the movement in a deep sense of history. Maya, often reluctant to step into the spotlight, found herself thrust into the role of spokesperson. Interviews with local and national media outlets became a regular part of her life. At first, she struggled with the attention, but Marcus's coaching and Jasmine's unwavering support helped her find her voice. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Maya sat in her living room with Marcus and Jasmine. A map of the city lay sprawled across the coffee table, marked with pins and notes detailing areas where police incidents were most frequent. "We need to focus here," Marcus said, pointing to a neighborhood notorious for heavy-handed policing. "These residents need to know they're not alone." Maya nodded, exhaustion etched into her face. "It's just so much, Marcus. I never imagined it would get this big." "It's big because it matters," Jasmine said, her voice gentle but firm. "People believe in this because they believe in you." Maya managed a small smile. "I just want to make sure we don't let them down." "You won't," Marcus said. "We won't." Challenges and resistance. As the Oversight Committee began to take shape, resistance mounted from various corners. Anonymous threats appeared in Maya's inbox, ranging from veiled warnings to outright hostility. Some colleagues at the hospital distanced themselves, their discomfort with her activism becoming evident in the strained silences and sidelong glances. The police union was the most vocal opponent. Representatives argued in city council meetings, on social media, and in interviews that the Oversight Committee was unnecessary and biased. Maya's name often came up in their criticisms, painting her as a troublemaker stirring division. One morning, as Maya reviewed the latest drafts of the committee's proposed structure, Marcus stormed into the office, holding a local newspaper. He slammed it on the table, revealing a headline that read, "Activist Nurse Endangering Community Trust." "They're trying to discredit you," he said, his voice simmering with anger. Maya stared at the headline, her stomach sinking. "I knew this would happen," she said quietly. "But seeing it in print—" "They're scared," Jasmine interjected. "And they should be. It means we're making progress." Maya exhaled, steadying herself. "Let them talk. We'll keep working." Community wins. Despite the opposition, the movement made tangible progress. A series of workshops on citizens' rights during police encounters drew hundreds of attendees. Youth mentorship programs, spearheaded by volunteers, offered teens a safe space to discuss their fears and dreams. Local businesses began displaying signs reading, "We support justice for all," signaling their solidarity. The Oversight Committee's structure was finalized after weeks of debate and community input. It included representatives from various neighborhoods, legal experts, and even a retired officer selected by the community. The committee would have the authority to conduct independent investigations and recommend disciplinary actions, a victory that felt hard-earned. Maya attended the first official meeting of the committee as an observer. She sat in the back of the room, watching as the diverse group discussed their agenda. Seeing the committee in action filled her with a quiet pride. This was what they had fought for, a tangible mechanism for change. Personal sacrifices. As the movement grew, so did the personal cost to Maya. She struggled to balance her demanding job as a nurse with her new responsibilities as a leader. Sleep became a luxury, and her once private life was now public property. Friends she had known for years grew distant, uncomfortable with the intensity of her newfound role. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Maya sat alone in her apartment, staring at a stack of notes. The weight of everything felt unbearable. She picked up her phone, scrolling through the messages she had received. Most were supportive, but a few hateful ones stood out, their venomous words cutting deep. "You're ruining everything for attention. Go back to being a nurse. Leave the real work to others. You'll regret this." Tears blurred her vision, and for a moment, she considered walking away. But then she saw a message from a young woman named Carla, a college student who had attended the rally. "Ms. Daniels, I just want to say thank you. You've inspired me to speak up in my own life. For the first time, I feel like my voice matters. You've changed more lives than you know." Maya set the phone down, her resolve hardening. She wasn't doing this for the critics or the naysayers. She was doing it for people like Carla, for everyone who needed to know they weren't alone. A national platform. Word of the movement reached beyond the city. Civil rights organizations invited Maya and Marcus to speak at regional conferences, sharing their journey and strategies for change. Maya was initially hesitant, unsure of how her local experience could translate to a broader audience. But Marcus encouraged her. "Your story is universal," he said. "People need to hear it." At one such conference, held in a packed auditorium, Maya stood before an audience of activists, students, and leaders. She spoke about the power of community, the importance of resilience, and the belief that change was possible when people came together. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she said, her voice steady. "It happens because ordinary people refuse to accept the unacceptable. It happens because we choose to stand together, even when it's hard. And it happens because we believe in a better future, not just for ourselves, but for those who come after us." Her speech received a standing ovation, and for the first time, Maya began to see herself not just as a leader in her community, but as part of a larger movement for justice, a legacy of hope. Months turned into a year, and the city began to feel the ripple effects of the Oversight Committee. Incidents of misconduct were brought to light and addressed. Training programs for officers emphasized cultural sensitivity and de-escalation. Community police dialogues fostered cautious but meaningful connections. Maya, though still deeply involved in the movement, found moments to reflect. One afternoon, she visited the park where the rally had taken place. The benches were filled with families. Children played on the swings, and the air was filled with laughter. A young girl approached her, clutching a notebook. "Ms. Daniels," she asked shyly, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Maya knelt to the girl's level, her smile warm. "You can be anything you want to be," she said. "And if you want to help people, start by believing in yourself. Change starts with one person." The girl beamed, and Maya felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The path hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. As she walked away, the sun dipping low in the sky, Maya knew the fight wasn't over. But she also knew that the seeds of change had been planted, and they would continue to grow, nurtured by a community that had found its voice and refused to be silenced. Together, they had built something lasting. Together, they had created a legacy of hope. As Maya walked home that evening, the weight of her journey felt lighter. The movement had transformed into something bigger than her, a force that was beginning to weave itself into the fabric of the city. But Maya knew change wasn't just about systems and policies. It was also about healing, rebuilding trust, and forging a future where justice wasn't a fight but a given. The first committee case. Weeks after the Oversight Committee was officially launched, its first case arrived, a clear example of the challenges ahead. The case involved a young man named Malik, who claimed he was pulled over for a broken taillight and subjected to an unnecessary search. Malik's story mirrored countless others Maya had heard, but this was the first test of the committee's resolve. Maya, although not directly involved in the investigation, attended the committee meetings as a silent supporter. The room was tense as the panel of community representatives, legal experts, and retired officers reviewed evidence and testimonies. Malik, a soft-spoken college student with dreams of becoming an engineer, sat at the front of the room with his mother by his side. "I wasn't doing anything wrong," Malik said, his voice shaking. "I was just driving home from school, but they made me feel like a criminal." The police officer involved argued that the search was routine and justified, citing suspicious behavior. But as the committee pressed him for details, cracks began to show in his story. Video evidence from a nearby store contradicted parts of his account, and witnesses testified to Malik's respectful demeanor during the encounter. After hours of deliberation, the committee ruled in Malik's favor, recommending disciplinary action for the officer and proposing reforms to prevent similar incidents. The decision marked a pivotal moment. The Oversight Committee had proven it could hold even the powerful accountable. When the ruling was announced, Malik's mother hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered to the committee members. "Thank you for seeing him." Maya stood at the back of the room, her heart swelling with pride. This was why they had fought so hard. This was the change they had envisioned. The costs of leadership. As the movement grew, so did the demands on Maya's time and energy. Her shifts at the hospital felt longer, her nights shorter, and her personal life almost non-existent. The relentless pace began to take a toll. One evening, after a grueling 12-hour shift, Maya collapsed onto her couch, her body aching and her mind racing. She stared at her phone, its screen filled with unread messages and emails. Marcus's voice on the answering machine reminded her of their upcoming meeting with a state representative, while Jasmine's texts buzzed with updates about a community event. Her phone buzzed again, a message from her supervisor at the hospital. It was a reminder that her performance review was due, coupled with a subtle suggestion that her activism was distracting her from her duties. Maya sighed, running a hand through her hair. She had always poured everything into her job, but now she felt pulled in too many directions. For the first time, doubt crept in. Was she sacrificing too much? Was she losing herself in the fight? Before she could sink further into her thoughts, there was a knock at her door. She opened it to find Marcus standing there, holding a bag of takeout and a bottle of wine. "You didn't answer my calls," he said, stepping inside. "Figured you could use a break." Maya smiled weakly, grateful for his presence. They sat in the living room, eating in comfortable silence. After a while, Marcus spoke. "You've been pushing yourself too hard," he said gently. "You don't have to carry this alone, Maya. That's what we're here for." Maya nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "It just feels like there's so much to do, and not enough of me to go around." "You're right," Marcus said. "There is a lot to do, but this isn't just your fight. It's all of ours. And you've already done more than enough to inspire others to step up." His words settled over her like a balm. For the first time in weeks, Maya allowed herself to rest, leaning into the support of her brother and the movement they had built together. Expanding the fight. The victory in Malik's case sent ripples through the city. Other community members began coming forward with their own stories, and the oversight committee gained credibility as a legitimate force for change. But Maya and Marcus knew they couldn't stop there. The root causes of injustice, poverty, lack of education, and systemic inequality required deeper solutions. They began collaborating with local organizations to address these issues. One initiative focused on creating job training programs for underserved youth. Another worked to establish mental health resources for communities affected by trauma. Schools were engaged to implement programs on civic responsibility and anti-bias education. Maya spoke at town halls, universities, and even state conferences, sharing the story of the movement and encouraging others to start their own. Her voice became a symbol of resilience, and her journey inspired similar efforts in neighboring cities. One afternoon, Maya received a letter from a teacher in a small town miles away. The letter detailed how the teacher's students had organized a Justice for All rally after hearing about Maya's story. Enclosed was a photo of the students holding signs, their faces alight with hope. Maya's tears fell freely as she held the photo. The movement was growing beyond anything she had imagined. It wasn't just a citywide effort anymore. It was a spark igniting change in places she had never even visited. A legacy in the making. A year after the council's decision, the city hosted its first Day of Justice, an event celebrating the progress made and recommitting to the work still ahead. The park where the initial rally had taken place was transformed into a vibrant hub of activity, with booths, performances, and speeches. Maya stood on the stage once again, the crowd larger than ever. As she looked out at the sea of faces, she saw familiar ones: Jasmine, Marcus, Roger, and Malik's family, alongside countless others who had joined the fight. "This movement began with a moment," Maya said, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "A moment of injustice that became a spark for change. But what keeps that spark alive is all of you. Every voice raised, every action taken, every story shared. It all matters." She paused, letting her words sink in. "The fight isn't over. There will be setbacks, challenges, and days when it feels like progress is too slow. But we must remember, change doesn't happen because of one person. It happens because of all of us, standing together, refusing to give up." The crowd erupted into applause, their energy a testament to the strength of the movement. As the event continued, a young girl approached Maya, holding a notebook. "Miss Maya," she said shyly, "I wrote a poem about justice. Do you want to hear it?" Maya knelt, smiling warmly. "I'd love to." The girl recited her poem, her small voice brimming with passion. When she finished, Maya hugged her tightly. "You're going to change the world someday," she said. As the sun set over the park, Maya stood with Marcus, watching families laugh, children play, and neighbors connect. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had been worth every step. "This is just the beginning," Marcus said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Maya nodded, a smile breaking across her face. "And we're ready for whatever comes next." Together, they had created a legacy of hope, a legacy that would inspire generations to come.